97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by InsideTheBirds.com. He's in! Live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, Happy Hour Friday, Football at 4. Andrew DiCecco, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Andrew, you can read his Eagles coverage this season at 97.3 ESPN.com. He's working on a story right now on the Eagles linebacking core, if you will. Is it a core? They have like two guys.
I got more than two now.
All right, we'll get into that and more. Football at 4, Andrew DiCecco, NFL on Twitter. And, of course, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. We got a lot to get into today. And Andrew joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotlines. Happy Hour Friday. What's in your fridge this weekend?
I think an OJ. It's from that same company that I had that space metal dinosaur from. It's Lone Pine Creek or something.
All right, OJ. I thought you were talking about a little like vodka and OJ or something there. A little orange
No, this
juice.
one's called OJ. You should check it out. It's definitely a heavy hitter. I had it a couple times.
Ooh, a little 8.4, huh?
I think it's like 8.2, but yeah, right
Oh!
in that ballpark. Right in that ballpark.
I like it. All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football 4. Let's get into some Eagles and NFL stuff here. Look, you're working on linebacker. It seems that it's the one position that the Eagles legitimately still have a lot of questions in other areas. There's going to be battles at other spots. But this linebacker spot right now, it's a piece you're working on. But right now, Nate Geary and TJ Edwards, they would be at the top of the depth chart. Is that acceptable?
Well, I mean, right now you'd be hard-pressed to find another player out there right now that can step in and give the Eagles more than what they already have on the roster. Nate Gary's been in the system since 2017, and Edwards was a phenomenal find for them last season as a post-draft addition. And I think that you kind of got to see him grow up towards the end of end of last season. He's primarily a rundown linebacker, but he showed some glimpses of being able to kind of, broaden his skill set and be a little bit more adept in the pass coverage. But I think he's probably, as it looks, looking at it right now, I think he's their best linebacker. When you look on the depth chart, my wild card is Duke Riley. Duke Riley, if you may remember, he was added at the end of September in that Jonathan Cyprian, and he played primarily on special teams. I believe he finished fourth on the Eagles in special teams production, and he played 28 snaps on defense, so he wasn't really a factor there. But I'll be interested to see how, after a year of getting acclimated to kind of take that next step, maybe fill that Kamu Grugier-Hill role.
Yeah, I know the people look at this linebacking core and scratch their head and wonder, but let me ask you, how important is that position now? The Eagles don't seem to value it. Are they just in that assessment?
Well, if you look and see the way the NFL is trending, it's primarily becoming defensive back heavy, and you really want those. And when they do have linebackers on the field, they're typically, undersized guys that are more adept at covering those dynamic tight ends and running backs out of the backfield and can kind of play their best in space. So I think when you look at what the Eagles have to work with, they have a lot of undersized guys, a lot of fast guys with good range and coverage acumen. So I think that, those days of that traditional downhill thumper are kind of all but extinct, right?
Yeah, we're not seeing Jeremiah Trotter suit up anymore, right?
No, I mean you'll see the occasional mold of like the early 2000s, and I mentioned TJ Edwards. He doesn't have that size that Trotter had, but he has that skill set of being primarily a run defender. But like I said, he's even shown signs that he has potential to develop as in coverage.
Jatavis Brown has played 4 years in the league, about 23 starts. Do you think he has a good shot at starting? And if not, why do you think that he isn't going to be able to be in that conversation? Like, what's holding him back?
Well, that's certainly interesting, Hunter, because Jatavis Brown, if you remember, he started off his NFL career as a starter. He was in 2016 when he came into the league as a fifth-round pick from Akron. And he struggled with injuries and inconsistent play. And then last season he played in 13 games with only one start, but he did play 51% of the special team snaps for them. Kind of fell out of favor and became an afterthought after he wasn't able. His availability was always up in the air, and he didn't have the prototypical size. He's 5'11", 220 pounds. So he kind of gets lost in there, and you get a big body on him. He kind of goes backwards and isn't very effective against the run. But he, like many of the linebackers on the Eagles roster, play their best in space.
Andrew DiCecco, Football 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com, joins us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. We talk a little bit about this Eagles linebacker group, and, you throw out undrafted rookie free agents. Is there anybody in that mix that can maybe help at linebacker, or do any other of these guys have a shot to impress, especially now, Andrew, that we touched on a little bit? It appears that we're going to see mini camps, which is going to be very helpful. So especially for the group of undrafted guys, which I know you know very well.
Yeah, so there's a guy that's going to be that's in the linebacking core right now that, while I don't think that he'll make the team, he'll certainly make things interesting this summer. His name's Dante Olson. I believe Moshe mentioned him previously as a tackling machine. And he's a guy that he went to Montana. He led the FBS in tackles, I believe, 2 years in a row. He had nearly 400 tackles at Montana. He was a Shrine Bowl guy, so I got a chance to see him there. He thrived really well, and he ran a very poor 40 time at the NFL Combine. If he doesn't run a 4.8, he likely gets drafted. He's going to have some stiff competition. Obviously, the draft picks are going to get priority over him as far as in the pecking order this summer with Sean Bradley and Davion Taylor and even Alex Singleton, who was there last season. But he'll make things interesting. And then, when I look at the running backs, Mike Warren, he has a tremendous opportunity there. I touched on him when we spoke on Tuesday, as far as just being a bigger back that can do some of the things that a smaller back can. He has very nimble feet and surprising agility for a bigger back, very patient going through the hole, outstanding contact balance, finishes his runs with conviction. And he caught 51 balls over the past 2 seasons at Cincinnati. And like I said, if he was entering Cincinnati as a senior this year, we're talking about Mike Warren as being one of the top running backs in college football. So I think the Eagles got a tremendous steal there, and I will see how that shakes out. But those are 2 names right there that I think can make some noise this summer.
I want to go back to Nate Gerry real quick, because we always mention him, and then it feels like the conversation is always about, well, who else is going to play with him? And we don't talk too much about what he's actually going to be able to provide. Do you think he is what he is, or do you think that there's room for him to grow and actually take a bigger step in his career?
This is a question I've kind of been mulling over, back and forth for the past few weeks. And with looking at Nate Gerry, he's a player that he actually did show somewhat, albeit slight, signs of improvement last season. I think more or less, Hunter, he is what he is at this stage. And that's a guy who's going to be he's an intelligent player. He's reliable. He's a favorite of the coaching staff. They know what he brings to the table. He's going to miss he takes poor angles with his tackling, and he has some lapses occasionally there, and he's not the quickest to diagnose plays, but he is very, he's very adept in coverage and sound on that aspect. And then you have the best of both worlds if he teams up with TJ Edwards, who's better at defending the run.
All right, I want to look at a couple things here. Let's move to the corner spot where we got so much happening. Now, Pro Football Focus, I was looking at, they predicted the 32 team starters. And the one spot I was interested in was the secondary. They have Avonte Maddox beating out Sidney Jones at that corner spot. Is that the biggest question on who will start opposite Slay? Is that, to you, the biggest battle at training camp?
Yeah, it's funny. In today's NFL, you rarely see any kind of camp battles, right? A lot of things are already predetermined in the offseason, but this is the battle that's I've had circled. And it's going to be really interesting. I think it could go very, very well go down to the wire there, because you have Avonte Maddox, who has a much more versatile skill set than Sidney Jones. He can move around a little bit, and he proved to be adept in the slot and safety and on the outside. But he also did struggle, if you remember the Green Bay Packers game with Devontae Adams, struggled with a little bit of size there. Sidney Jones, let's face it, man, this is his 4th season. This is, really 3rd, if you're not, because, his 2017 season was essentially a redshirt year. But, I mean, he needed to get a little bit stronger. He gets bullied by bigger receivers, and he struggled with some soft tissue injuries last season with the hamstring. But this is a make or break year for Sidney Jones. He has all the ability in the world, but now it's kind of time to take what you've learned in the meetings and on the practice field and apply that to onto the field and make some noise and prove to the Eagles that you're the 46th overall pick, the guy that they went to go get, despite having the Achilles injury.
All right, so Rhodes and I were going back and forth on Jim Schwartz and a couple things that we talked about. I want to get your take on Schwartz's use of Jenkins, how do you see him utilizing someone on this team like he did Jenkins, or are we going to have to see Schwartz kind of evolve the way that he coordinates this defense?
I think in time, Kayvon Wallace can be that guy. Right now, I wouldn't say that they have a Jenkins ready, player that can do all the things that he was able to do. Because if you remember, he was able to play in the slot, linebacker, single high, do all those things. Jalen Mills, I think they would like for him to do that, but he's not. He can't cover the slot adequately, at least, and do it for a sustained period of time. So, but Kayvon Wallace can. Will Parks can. I think Will Parks is a guy that will probably get that first crack to do all those different things. But as far as having that surefire guy that, hey, this guy's going to step in and fill the Malcolm Jenkins role, I think that's kind of going to have to play itself out this summer.
Sticking with the Jim Schwartz theme that we were talking about earlier in the show, do you think that Darius Slay is going to stay on one side of the field, or do you think he's going to cover the number one opponent of the other squad when it comes to the receiver?
I think he'll actually travel. When you have a corner with the caliber of Darius Slay, I think that, it would be a sin to, not utilize him to travel with the opposition's best receiver. And because you know that he's going to take care of that assignment for the game, and you won't even have to worry about that. And then the question becomes, okay, well, how's the guy playing opposite him going to hold up? And, right now I think that'll be Avonte Maddox, but I could definitely see him traveling. The Eagles haven't had a corner of his caliber in a while.
All right. So does Schwartz, and we don't know this yet, and this is strictly probably opinion. I mean, unless you've, talked to people who know Schwartz better, but does Schwartz value having that better corner, or would he value having a versatile player like Malcolm Jenkins?
Well, I think he saw what not having a reliable cornerback situation could, kind of hamstrings him as far as what he can do as a defensive coordinator. He was able to kind of get by with smoke and mirrors at some points and some Band-Aids, and he got good. He got lucky. He got a good production out of Crayvon LeBlanc, who he claimed off waivers. And I think that, when he actually has a top flight corner like Darius Slay, I think you'll be able to see him be more flexible in the things and more aggressive, actually, in some of the things that he can do.
I am so intrigued by this Avonte Maddox, Sidney Jones fight for the outside. And I just think to myself, if Avonte Maddox does become the starter and stays the starter and Sidney Jones is more of a depth guy, do you think this is the last season that Sidney Jones is in an Eagles uniform? I mean, keep in mind, he was the second-round pick, like you stated.
Right. So if it shakes out that way, Hunter, the way I can't see him Sidney Jones, that is, coming back for another season, given if that's the way that it plays out. Because he's had so many different opportunities, I think he would be better, it would be better for him to be in another situation to change the scenery and maybe another coaching staff.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football 4, 97.3 ESPN, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Andrew, another thing I want to get into, so Pro Football Focus was putting out their most underrated players. I thought their pick for the Eagles was very interesting, and I want to get your take on how you see them using Dallas Goedert. He was the guy they said is the most underrated Eagle, which I could agree with. I think he's an underrated player that if he was on another team, he'd probably be, putting up monster numbers. However, how do you see him now fitting in with the Eagles? It will be interesting to see what they do with him moving forward with the hopeful return of Deshaun Jackson, adding Jalen Reagor, Marquise Goodwin in the offseason, the hopeful improvement from J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, a full season from Greg Ward. So 87 targets for Dallas Goedert with all of those guys plus more from Miles Sanders. How does he add to his numbers that he got last year? How do you see them fitting Dallas Goedert into their offense?
Well, Dallas Goedert has top 10 upside at the position. I think that's very obvious. And he's even a better athlete than Zach Ertz is, which is saying something. I think that they're going to have to run more 12 personnel this year than they have even last year and find different ways to get him on the field, whether that's being, out wide or just simply playing more 12 personnel. But when you have somebody that can do the things that he can do, he's more of a downfield threat. He can create separation downfield and after the catch, he's more of a threat to score, and he just has game-breaking ability. And I think when you have a player like that, you have to find a way to get him the football because you want as many talented players on the field as you can. But, whether that's having both your tight ends on the field or not, but I think that he has to be out there.
Do you ever see the Eagles maybe moving on from Goddard since they have Zach Ertz, or maybe keeping or vice versa, or keeping one of them and get rid of the other?
Well, I think honestly it's a good problem to have two top flight tight ends and they both have, not only have two top flight tight ends, but have two guys that can move around formation, so they're not just strictly in one spot the entire season. You can get creative in how you can get them the football, move them around. I would think they would keep both of those guys and try. The goal is always to add as many talented players on offense as you can. And I think that when you have two guys that are among the top 10 at their respective positions, I don't think that you can even put that in a discussion as far as trading one of them.
I guess the hard part with that is, you got Goddard, you got Ertz. That means one of those wide receivers needs to come off the field most likely. I mean, unless you're going to go empty backfield. But that means who's the odd man out if you're going to have Goddard on the field, 50, 60, 70% of the time.
Yeah, well, it's funny because last year they struggled finding any kind of offensive spark, and this year they have almost an embarrassment of riches at the offensive skill positions. So like you said, I mean, obviously Dallas Goedert is one of your top offensive weapons. So, and he's proven. So I think when you look at someone's going to have to take a back seat. And I think that if you're looking at that, I think that would probably be J.J. Arcega-Whiteside right now. I think you want to get that first-round pick on the field. You want to have Deshaun Jackson out there. And you want to have both your tight ends.
All right, talking about weapons, differences between Hightower and Quez Watkins. A lot of people, don't know a lot about these guys, and as the summer goes on and we're trying to picture what the offense might look like, Hightower, Watkins, two different players, two different skill sets, but what do they bring and what are their differences?
Well, they're actually kind of similar players, really, when you look at it. I had a chance to see John Hightower at the East-West Shrine Bowl, and when I got to see him, he's a lengthier player than is Quez Watkins, and he surprised me from a route running standpoint where the film that I got to see on John Hightower, he was more raw in that area, but he separated from every defensive back that he lined up against in the one-on-ones, tracked the ball extremely well, which I hadn't seen on tape. And he also adds a different dimension as a kick returner, which, when you're looking at the sixth receiver on a depth chart, special teams is more of a focus than your receiving skill set. So I think that he has the upper hand there. But then with Quez Watkins, you're talking about a guy who ran the second fastest 40 time at the NFL Combine. He's more of a vertical threat right now than that. Doesn't really have a wide array of routes that he can run at this time. He's more of a raw prospect, I would say, but he does offer some upside, but doesn't have that special teams upside that John Hightower has. So that's why I'm giving him the edge. All things even.
I was going to say, who's better, but who fits better?
I think that John Hightower fits better. And one thing that Quez Watkins will have to work on is his releases off press coverage. He needs to get a little bit stronger. John Hightower does as well, but he actually gained a little bit of size throughout the pre-draft process. When I saw him at the Shrine Bowl, he was a little bit bigger than he looked on tape. And I think now he's listed at about 190 or so at 6'1". So he has a little bit more size and a little bit more of a diverse skill set right now. But Quez Watkins there's a lot of intrigue with him as far as being that developmental vertical element there. He's going to be in contention with Greg Ward and John Hightower for that sixth spot. So it's going to come down. That'll be another battle. We talked about cornerback being a big battle to watch. I think this will be another one that'll be front and center.
You mentioned press coverage, and I actually asked Adam this yesterday about Jalen Reagor and his press coverage. Do you think that he will struggle a bit in that area since he's a smaller receiver at 5'11"?
It's funny you mentioned that, Hunter, because I had to talk to his offensive coordinator, Sonny Cumbie, in April before the draft. And one of the things that he said that, Reagor needed to improve on, or if he had to identify an area of improvement, I guess he would say, when some of these longer corners get their hands on him at the line of scrimmage, that's sometimes where you would see any kind of a little bit of a struggle. Getting him into an NFL system with a new receivers coach like Aaron Moorhead, who played the position, who is a bigger receiver, who defeated press coverage with regularity. I think when you have somebody that's done it, I think that'll be an area of his game where it shouldn't be as much of a problem. Probably midway through his season, I think it's going to be a little bit of adjustment though.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, powered by Inside the Birds. Biggest void on defense still?
Biggest void on defense, Jeff and I talked about this. Right now, I would say number 3 defensive end, when you look at the production that Chris Long gave you for a few seasons, and you look at what Vinny Curry gave you last year, and now you look at, you have a lot of names, but they're unproven ones. Josh Sweat had 4 sacks last season, played all 16 games, actually played very similar. I think Vinny Curry played 39% of the snaps. Josh Sweat played 35. Vinny had 5 sacks. Josh Sweat had 4. So there is a lot. I've always been a proponent of letting your young guys, play it out. Let it play out with your young guys that you invested in. And as a fallback plan, you're always going to have the veteran like a Vinny Curry out there, or possibly even an Everson Griffin. But number 3 defensive end, you see how vital that role is to Jim Schwartz and how they're going to be used. And you saw Vinny Curry be very effective last year as an inside and off the edge rusher. So they're going to have to play a lot of snaps here, and there's a lot of names there. Josh Sweat, Sharif Miller, Joe Osman, Deshaun Hall is coming off torn ACL from the end of last season. He would have been my preference for that role, but I think that they would be best suited to move forward with their young contingent of defensive ends and let them prove that they can do that role.
What about offense? Biggest remaining void on the offensive side?
I said swing tackle. The loss of Halapulu Avonte Maddox is going to prove to be a little bit bigger, a little bit greater of a loss than some people actually realize. When you move past, when you get into your reserves, your senior lineman becomes Matt Pryor, who always has, I think he has less than 100 snaps at the professional level. He played tackle at TCU. He also played some guard. He played right guard last year. He started the wild card game for Brandon Brooks. But he's very raw, but he's a guy that will probably get the first crack at it. You have Jordan Mailata there. I don't know that he offers that swing tackle versatility. And then you have a lot of guys like Jack Driscoll. You got Prince Tegawanagu, and you have Nate Herbig, who's more of an interior player. So I think that when you saw how they really needed to depend on Vaitai down the stretch there, and you saw how crucial he was for that 13-game stretch in 2017, and then also in various spots throughout his 4 years in Philadelphia. That's gonna be a big role that one of those guys is gonna have to step up and take.
Football 4, Andrew DiCecco is with us at A DiCecco NFL. What's your thoughts on the onside kick? Did you like the idea the Eagles threw on the table with the 4th down and 15, or would you just prefer they stick with the onside kick?
I like the idea, but I think that when the NFL look at the idea from a fairness standpoint, in today's NFL, it's fairly easy to pick up a 4th and 15. And when you're comparing it to how hard it is to get an onside kick, I don't necessarily know that's. I think if you made it a 4th and 20 or a 4th and 20, something a little bit more challenging, I think that rule may have stood a chance. But I think 4th and 15, I think that the NFL still wants to go along with the kickoffs and have that element of the game before it's all going all together.
All right, he's Andrew DiCecco. Good stuff, Football at 4. And, of course, he'll be back on Tuesday. Jeff Mosher is in on Monday. And, of course, Football at 4 powered by Inside the Birds. We talk NFL and Eagles every day, 4 o'clock, Football at 4. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the OJ.
Yeah, yes, sir. Talk to you guys next week.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.